What would you do if you were a millionaire and discovered that in your own restaurant they treated you like trash? Leonardo Mendoza never imagined that disguising himself as an ordinary customer would change his life forever. When he ordered a simple asada taco, the waitress Manuela approached nervously and discreetly slid a piece of paper under his napkin. What he read in that note left him completely paralyzed. What could that message contain that was so dangerous that an employee would risk passing it to a complete stranger? What follows will shock you. Leonardo took off the gold Rolex he always wore on his wrist, carefully storing it in the safe in his office. His Italian designer suit was hung in the closet, replaced by a simple shirt and worn jeans he had bought that very morning. He looked at himself in the marble bathroom mirror of his penthouse in San Pedro Garza Garcia, the most exclusive area of Monterey. The man looking back at him was no longer Leonardo Mendoza, owner of the most successful restaurant chain in northern Mexico. He was simply Leonardo, a regular guy who wanted to eat some tacos, but there was something deeper in that transformation. He was tired, very tired of the fake smiles, the automatic yes, sir, and the looks that only saw dollar bills when they looked at him. He wanted to know what it felt like to be treated like a normal person. He wanted to discover if someone could see him for who he really was, not for what he had in the bank. His chauffeur was waiting downstairs with the armored Mercedes, but Leonardo walked the corner and raised his hand to hail a taxi. The driver, an older man with a gray mustache, looked at him through the rearview mirror as he started the car. "Where the boss?" he asked with a Monterey accent that Leonardo loved so much in his hometown. "To Tradiciones de Monterey restaurant, please," he replied, feeling butterflies in his stomach as if it were the first time he visited his own business. During the ride, he observed the city he loved so much, the mountains of the Sierra Madre Oriental embracing the valley, the modern buildings blending with colonial architecture, the people walking the streets with that characteristic warmth of northerners. Monterey was his home, but it had been years since he experienced it as a common citizen. He was always transported in armored cars, always entered through back doors, always surrounded by security. Today would be different. Today he would be free. When the taxi stopped in front of Tradiciones de Monterey, Leonardo felt a knot in his stomach. It was his most beloved restaurant, the first he had opened 10 years ago when he still dreamed of honoring the traditional cuisine of Nuevo Leon. The quarry stone facade and wrought iron details welcomed him as always, but this time there would be no red carpet or manager rushing to greet him. He paid the taxi driver with crumpled bills he had saved especially for this occasion and walked toward the main entrance. His hands trembled slightly as he pushed the glass door open. The familiar aroma of freshly made tortillas, grilled meat, and spices hit him like a nostalgic caress. This place represented everything he loved about Mexico: the tradition, the family, the food made with love, but it also represented an empire that had distanced him from those same roots. The diners laughed and chatted at the tables, unaware that the owner of it all had just entered disguised among them. Roberto Herrera, the restaurant manager, was supervising the tables when he saw a man enter who made no special impression on him. He was a medium height, dark-skinned, with simple clothes and shoes that had seen better days. He didn't even bother to approach personally. Maria shouted to one of the hostesses, "Take care of the gentleman at the entrance." Leonardo waited standing by the door, observing how other customers were received with more enthusiasm. A well-dressed family arrived behind him. Immediately, Roberto approached with his best smile, greeted them effusively, and escorted them to a table by the window with a view of Cerro de la Silla. Leonardo clenched his fists inside his pockets. It was exactly what he had suspected. In his own restaurant, the one he had built with a philosophy that all customers deserved the same respect, distinctions were made based on appearance. Maria finally arrived with an expression of poorly concealed annoyance. "Table, how many people?" she asked without even looking him in the eyes. "For one person, please," Leonardo replied, trying to stay calm. The table they assigned him was in the most forgotten corner of the restaurant, next to the kitchen door, where the noise of plates and the comings and goings of staff constantly interrupted. It had no view of the inner garden he had personally designed, nor was it near the musicians playing traditional Nuevo Leon songs. It was the kind of table where they put customers they considered less important. Leonardo sat on a metal chair that creaked under his weight and took the menu with hands that no longer trembled from nerves, but from contained indignation. All of this was his. Every chair, every plate, every ingredient in the kitchen. He had invested not only millions of pesos, but his heart and soul to create a place where people could feel at home. And now, disguised as a common customer, he discovered that that dream had turned into a nightmare of discrimination and classism. He read the menu he knew by heart, wondering how many other customers had been treated this way. How many people had come seeking the authentic experience he promised in his advertising, only to encounter the contempt of employees who thought themselves superior. But who would approach to serve him at that forgotten table and change the course of his life forever? "Oh, no way," Manuela Sanchez murmured as she saw she had been assigned to serve the corner table. It was her first day covering the afternoon shift at Tradiciones de Monterrey after working only mornings for 6 months to care for her brother Diego in the afternoons. She desperately needed the extra tips, but she knew the corner tables never left good tips. Roberto always put there the customers he considered insignificant. Students, construction workers, humble families who could afford to eat out once a month. "That table is yours, Manuela," Roberto had told her with his crooked smile she knew all too well. "I'm sure you and that customer will hit it off." The mocking tone didn't escape her. Roberto always made those derogatory comments about her humble origins. Manuela came from the Independencia neighborhood, one of the most working-class areas of Monterrey, and she never hid it. She was proud of her roots, her hard-working family, of having come this far through sheer effort. But Roberto never missed an opportunity to remind her of it, as if it were something she should be ashamed of. Manuela approached the table with her best smile, the same one she used for all customers, whether a window table or the most forgotten corner of the place. "Good afternoon. Welcome to Tradiciones de Monterrey," she said with genuine warmth, looking directly into the eyes of the man sitting there. Leonardo looked up from the menu and was speechless for a moment. The woman in front of him was beautiful, but it wasn't that artificial, perfect beauty he was used to in his social circle. It was a natural, authentic beauty that shone more in her sincere smile and expressive eyes than in any physical feature. She had dark brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail, light brown skin that spoke of her Mexican mestizo roots, and honey-colored eyes that glimmered with a light he hadn't seen in a long time. "Thank you," he finally managed to say. "I'm very glad to be here." And surprisingly, it was true. For the first time in months, he felt genuinely happy to be somewhere. "Is this your first time at our restaurant?" Manuela asked while serving water in his glass, noticing that the man seemed to observe everything with special attention. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't place what it was. Maybe it was the way he looked at the place, as if evaluating every detail, every sound, every aroma. Or perhaps it was the way his eyes had hardened when Roberto passed near his table, without even greeting him. "Not exactly," Leonardo replied carefully, "but it's the first time I've come here alone like this." It was a strange answer, but Manuela didn't ask more. She had learned to respect the privacy of customers, especially those who seemed to carry complicated stories. And this man definitely had a complicated story. It showed in the way his shoulders carried a tension that didn't match his relaxed appearance. "Well, I'm glad you decided to come," she told him sincerely. "Our asada tacos are the best in all of Monterrey. Can I recommend something special?" Leonardo ordered asada tacos with handmade tortillas, charro beans, and a nice cold Coca-Cola. While Manuela jotted down his order, he observed how other waiters attended to the important tables. They took care to explain each dish, recommended wines, and ensured nothing was missing. But when Roberto passed by supervising, he stopped at Leonardo's table with an expression of obvious annoyance. Manuela called out to him in a loud voice so other customers could hear. "Make sure this gentleman pays before serving the food. You know how some customers are." The humiliation was intentional and public. Several diners turned to watch the scene, and Leonardo felt his blood boil in his veins. He had built his restaurant on the principles of respect and dignity for all, and his own manager was trampling those values in front of him. But what hurt him most was seeing the expression of shame on Manuela's face. She lowered her gaze, clearly accustomed to that kind of humiliation from Roberto. "Don't worry about that," Manuela murmured to Leonardo when Roberto walked away. He's like that with everyone. Don't take it personally. But Leonardo did take it personally, very personally, not just for lack of respect toward him, but for the way Roberto treated Manuela. He had noticed the tension in her shoulders when her boss approached, the way she lowered her eyes as if used to receiving humiliating orders. Does he always treat you like that? Leonardo asked, unable to contain his indignation. Manuela looked surprised by the direct question. Most customers pretended not to notice those awkward situations. Oh, don't worry about it, sir, she responded with a forced smile. I'll go get your tacos. They'll be ready in a few minutes. She hurried off toward the kitchen, but Leonardo could see her hands trembling slightly. There was something deeper going on there, something beyond a rude boss with his employees. There was real fear in those honey-colored eyes, real fear. But what Leonardo didn't know was that Manuela would return to his table with more than just tacos, something that would leave him completely paralyzed. Manuela returned to the table expertly balancing the steaming plate of tacos in one hand and a cold Coca-Cola in the other. Leonardo could immediately smell the aroma of the perfectly seasoned grill meat, the freshly made corn tortillas, and the charro beans that had been his grandmother's specialty. But there was something different in the way Manuela placed the plate in front of him. Her movements were faster than usual. Her eyes nervously glanced toward where Roberto was, and her fingers trembled slightly as she set the napkin beside the plate. Here are your tacos, sir, she said with seemingly normal voice. But Leonardo caught a tone of urgency that hadn't been there before. They're freshly made, just as I promised. As she spoke, she discreetly slid something under the napkin. It was such a subtle move that any other customer wouldn't have noticed, but Leonardo was watching every detail. Enjoy them a lot, she added, and for a second their eyes met. In that look, there was a mix of plea and desperation that froze him. Leonardo waited until Manuela walked away to carefully lift the napkin. Underneath was a small piece of paper folded several times, the size of a bus ticket. His hands trembled as he unfolded it, wondering what could be so important that a waitress would risk passing a secret note to an unknown customer. The letters were handwritten in blue ink with careful but hurried calligraphy, as if written in hiding. The manager Roberto is stealing. He changes prices in the system, keeps tip money, and threatens employees. I have proof, but he says if I speak, he'll harm my brother Diego. I don't know what to do. If you know someone important, please help us. Leonardo read the note 3 times, feeling each word like a punch to the stomach. His worst suspicions were being confirmed in the most painful way possible. Not only was his manager stealing, but he was using threats against his employees' families to keep them quiet. The paper crinkled in his fingers as the reality hit him like a giant wave. This wasn't just his restaurant being robbed. It wasn't just his money being stolen. This was something much worse. Roberto was destroying everything Leonardo had worked for, the trust, the respect, the dignity of his employees. He was turning Tradiciones de Monterrey into the exact opposite of what Leonardo had dreamed of when he opened it. His vision had been to create a place where both customers and employees felt valued and respected, where Mexican family traditions were honored, where money mattered, but never more than the people. And Roberto had taken that beautiful vision and corrupted it completely. Leonardo looked toward where Manuela was, now serving another table with the same professional smile, and realized she had no idea who he really was. To her, he was simply a common customer who might be able to help her. She had trusted a complete stranger because she had no one else. Leonardo tucked the note into the pocket of his shirt, directly over his heart, and tried to eat the tacos that now tasted like cardboard to him. Each bite was hard to swallow as he discreetly watched Roberto move around the restaurant as if he owned the place. He saw him approach the cash register when the cashier was distracted. He saw him intercept a waiter returning with tips. He saw him head toward Manuela with an expression that boded nothing good. Roberto approached her while she was cleaning an empty table and murmured something in her ear that made her turn pale. Leonardo couldn't hear the words, but he saw Manuela's shoulders tense and her hand stop on the table surface. Roberto smiled with satisfaction and walked away, leaving Manuela standing there, motionless with a lost gaze. Leonardo felt a fury he hadn't experienced in years, a primal rage that rose from the depths of his soul. That man wasn't just stealing his money. He was terrorizing an innocent woman who was only trying to earn an honest living. When Manuela returned to ask if everything was okay with his food, Leonardo looked directly into her eyes and said in a low voice, "I received your message." He saw her eyes widen with surprise and fear. "I don't know what you're talking about, sir," she murmured quickly, looking around to ensure no one overheard them. "Calm down," Leonardo told her with the softest voice he could muster. "I want to help you, but I need to know more." Manuela shook her head, clearly terrified. "I can't talk here," she whispered. "He's watching us." Leonardo followed her gaze and indeed saw Roberto observing them from the bar, his eyes narrowed and a suspicious expression on his face. "Where can we talk?" Leonardo asked urgently. Manuela hesitated for a moment, clearly debating internally whether she could trust this stranger. "Parque Fundadora. Tomorrow at 8 p.m. by the main fountain," she finally murmured. "But if this is a trap—" "It's not a trap," Leonardo assured her. "I promise you by my mother." It was a sacred promise in Mexican culture, and Manuela seemed to relax slightly upon hearing it. But what neither of them knew was that Roberto had read their lips from a distance and was already planning his revenge. The night in Monterey had arrived with its characteristic October freshness, and Parque Fundadora was illuminated by lights that created golden reflections in the main fountain. Leonardo arrived 15 minutes before the agreed time, dressed again in simple clothes, but this time wearing a sweater that had belonged to his father. It was a garment of no monetary value, but full of memories, and for some reason, he felt it would help him connect better with Manuela. He sat on one of the benches surrounding the fountain, watching families strolling with their children, young couples holding hands, and grandparents feeding the ducks. This was real life, the life of the people who worked in his restaurants, the life he had lost somewhere between executive meetings and financial reports. At exactly 8 p.m., he saw Manuela walking toward him with nervous steps. She wore a pale pink sweater that highlighted the golden tone of her skin, and her loose hair moved softly with the night breeze. But what Leonardo noticed most was the expression of absolute terror on her face. It wasn't just nervousness about meeting a stranger. It was deep, visceral fear. "Thank you for coming," Leonardo said, standing up as she reached the bench. "I didn't know if you'd dare." Manuela sat at the far end of the bench, maintaining a cautious distance. "I shouldn't be here," she murmured. "If Roberto finds out, what will he do to you?" Leonardo asked, though he feared the answer. Manuela closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength to speak. "You don't understand," she said finally. "Roberto isn't just my boss. He knows dangerous people, people who can really hurt." Her words were like ice in Leonardo's veins. His restaurant wasn't just being robbed by a dishonest employee. It was being used as a base for something much more sinister. "Tell me everything," he requested with a soft but firm voice. From the beginning, Manuela looked into his eyes for a long moment, as if evaluating whether she could truly trust him. Finally, something in Leonardo's expression convinced her. "It started 6 months ago," Manuela began with a trembling voice. "My brother Diego got sick. He has leukemia and needs very expensive treatments that insurance doesn't fully cover. I was only working part-time at the restaurant, but I needed more money, so I asked Roberto if I could work more hours." Leonardo felt his heart sink. He knew that situation well. Mexico had a healthcare system that worked well for basic cases, but for complex diseases like cancer, families often had to choose between bankruptcy or losing a loved one. Roberto said he could give me more shifts, but that I'd have to cooperate with him. At first, I thought he meant working extra hours without additional pay, and I agreed because I needed the job. Manuela paused, wiping a tear that had begun to roll down her cheek. But then I realized that cooperating meant keeping my mouth shut about the things he was doing. The things he was doing. Leonardo felt nauseous imagining what she meant. "What kind of things?" he asked, though part of him didn't want to know. "At first, they were small things," Manuela continued. "He'd change prices in the system after customers paid and keep the difference, or he'd charge tips on credit cards that he never gave the waiters. I thought, well, it's theft, but it's not my problem, right?" Leonardo nodded, understanding that logic perfectly. When someone desperately needs money to save a loved one, it's easy to convince oneself that others' problems aren't their responsibility. But then things got worse. Manuela went on, and her voice cracked slightly. He started bringing strange people to the restaurant after closing hours, men who didn't seem like regular customers, and he forced me to stay and serve them, even though it was officially closed. Leonardo felt his blood freeze. His beautiful restaurant, his dream come true, was being used for activities he didn't even want to imagine. "What kind of men?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. Men with tattoos, with gold chains, with very expensive cars, but plates that changed constantly, Manuela described with an increasingly low voice. They talked about shipments, territories, things I didn't understand, but that sounded very dangerous. And Roberto acted as if he were their boss when they were there. Leonardo clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. His restaurant was being used as a meeting point for drug traffickers or some other type of criminals. Everything he had built, his entire legacy, was being corrupted in the most horrible way possible. "Is that why you can't report him?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "One day, he caught me taking photos of the documents where he changed the prices," Manuela explained. "He grabbed my arm so hard it left bruises and told me that if I spoke to anyone about what was happening at the restaurant, his friends would visit Diego in the hospital." Her eyes filled with tears again. "My brother is 17. Sir, he's so weak from chemotherapy that he can't even get out of bed." And Roberto showed me photos of Diego sleeping in his hospital room. Photos someone had taken without anyone noticing. Manuela covered her face with her hands and began to sob silently. Leonardo felt a mix of fury and compassion that threatened to overwhelm him completely. This brave, beautiful woman was being terrorized to protect criminals who were using his restaurant. And worst of all, as the owner, he was responsible for hiring Roberto, for not supervising better, for allowing this to go so far. "Manuela," he said softly, leaning a little closer to her on the bench. "Trust me." She lifted her gaze with red eyes but with a spark of hope. "Why would a stranger help me?" she asked. "What do you gain by getting involved in such big trouble?" It was a valid question, and Leonardo knew he couldn't fully answer it without revealing his identity. But there was something he could tell her. "Because what's happening is wrong," he said with absolute conviction. "And because you deserve to live without fear." But what Leonardo didn't know was that while they conversed in Parque Fundadora, Roberto was making a phone call that would change everything. "Boss, we have a problem. The waitress is talking to someone. I think we need to send a message. Will Manuela be able to fully trust Leonardo? Comment on what you would do in her place." 3 days after the park encounter, Leonardo returned to Tradicion's de Monterey restaurant, but this time with a completely different plan. He had dressed as a construction worker just off his shift. Overalls stained with cement, worn boots, and a Rayados de Monterey cap he had bought from a street vendor. He had even dirted his nails and let his 3-day beard grow to look more authentic. When he entered the restaurant at 6 p.m., the busiest hour, Roberto barely glanced at him. It was exactly what Leonardo expected. To Roberto, manual laborers were invisible. They didn't deserve his attention or respect. Manuela was busy serving a table of businessmen when she saw him enter. For a moment, their eyes met, and Leonardo could see a flash of recognition, immediately followed by concern. He made an almost imperceptible gesture for her to stay calm and act normal. He needed to observe Roberto's operations without raising suspicion, and the best way to do that was by becoming the type of customer Roberto completely ignored. They assigned him the same corner table, and this time Leonardo was grateful for it. For the next 2 hours, Leonardo observed and took mental notes of everything that happened. He saw Roberto intercept cash tips that customers left, slipping them into his pocket when he thought no one was watching. He saw him alter bills in the system, adding drinks or desserts that had never been ordered. He saw how he treated the employees with contempt, especially the waiters who came from humble neighborhoods like Manuela. But what hurt him most was seeing Manuela tense up every time Roberto approached her, the way she lowered her gaze, how she slightly shrank, how her hands trembled when he spoke to her. Leonardo had seen that same reaction in women who had suffered abuse and realized that Roberto wasn't just blackmailing her with threats against her brother. He was intimidating her in ways that probably went beyond the professional. When Manuela finally reached his table, Leonardo could see she had deep dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't slept in days. "How is Diego?" he asked in a low voice as she served his water. Manuela froze for a moment, surprised that he asked about her brother. "How do you know?" she began to ask, but Leonardo interrupted her gently. "You told me the other day, remember?" he said with a reassuring smile. "I just want to know how he is." Manuela's eyes filled with tears, but she managed to hold them back. "He's getting worse," she murmured. "The doctors say he needs a more aggressive treatment, but it costs a lot of money." Leonardo felt his heart break. Here was a woman working tirelessly to save her brother, being abused and threatened by her boss, and he had the power to solve it all with a simple phone call to his bank. But if he revealed his identity now, would she believe his intentions were genuine, or would she think it had all been a manipulation from the start? "Can I ask you something personal?" Leonardo said after a moment. Manuela nodded nervously. "What would you do if someone offered you real help? Not free money, but an opportunity to completely change your situation." Manuela looked at him with a mix of hope and distrust. "Why are you asking me that?" she responded with another question. "Because I think you deserve something better than living in fear," Leonardo said with total sincerity. "And because there are people in this world who do care about doing the right thing." It was a dangerous conversation to have in a restaurant, but Leonardo couldn't help it. Every minute he spent watching Roberto abuse his authority, every second he saw Manuela suffer in silence, brought him closer to the decision to reveal everything. "You talk as if you know those people," Manuela observed perceptively. "How do I know you're not another Roberto trying to take advantage of me when I'm vulnerable?" It was a smart, justified question, and Leonardo respected her for asking it. "You don't know," he admitted honestly. "You can only trust your instinct. What does your heart tell you about me?" Manuela studied him for a long moment, as if reading his soul through his eyes. "My heart says you're different," she murmured finally, "but my head says I'm a fool for trusting strangers." Leonardo took a piece of paper from his pocket and quickly wrote his phone number. "This is my number," he said, sliding the paper toward her discreetly. "If you ever need urgent help, call me, no matter what time it is." Manuela took the paper with trembling hands. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Leonardo thought carefully about his response. He couldn't tell her he was a restaurant owner, but he could tell her a deeper truth. "Because I recognize a good person when I see one," he said finally, "and because good people deserve someone to fight for them." At that moment, Roberto suddenly appeared next to his table. "Manuela," he said with a harsh voice, "why are you chatting with customers so much? You have other tables waiting." The message was clear. Get away from Leonardo immediately. Manuela stood up quickly, but before leaving, she murmured something only he could hear. "Be very careful. Roberto is asking questions about you." That night, Leonardo couldn't sleep, thinking about Manuela's words and the way her eyes had shone when he offered help. The following week, Leonardo had established a routine that had him completely obsessed. Every day he visited the restaurant in a different disguise, always requesting that Manuela serve him. One day he arrived as an electrician, another as an accountant from a small company, another as an elementary school teacher. Each persona allowed him to observe different aspects of Roberto's criminal operations, but he was honest with himself. That was no longer his main motivation. What really brought him back every day was the opportunity to talk to Manuela, to see her smile when she recognized him despite his disguises, to feel that connection growing stronger with each encounter. He had never experienced anything like this, a woman who saw him for who he really was inside, not for his bank account or social status. Manuela had started to expect him, instinctively reserving the corner table when she saw him arrive, making excuses to stay longer chatting with him. "My favorite customer has arrived," she would whisper sometimes as she approached his table. And those simple words made Leonardo feel more valued than all the $1,000,000 contracts he had signed in his life. "How is Diego today?" had become the first question Leonardo asked every time Manuela reached his table, and she had started sharing increasingly intimate details. How Diego worried about her, how he sometimes pretended to feel better to avoid upsetting her, how he read engineering books because he dreamed of building bridges someday. "He's so smart," she would tell him with fraternal pride. "Much smarter than me. Before he got sick, he had a scholarship to study at the Monterey Institute of Technology." Leonardo listened to every word, memorizing every detail, feeling his heart fill not only with love for Manuela, but also with affection for a boy he had never met, but already considered important simply because he was important to her. "I'd love to meet him someday," Leonardo told her one afternoon, and he saw Manuela's eyes light up with a happiness he hadn't seen before. "He'd like to meet you, too," she responded. "I've told him about you." The idea that Manuela talked about him with her brother made Leonardo feel a warmth that had nothing to do with Monterey's climate. Their conversations had evolved from cautious exchanges to deep confidences. Manuela had told him about her childhood in the Independencia neighborhood, about how her mother worked cleaning houses to support the family after their father abandoned them when Diego was 10. "My mom died 3 years ago of lung cancer," she confided one afternoon, "and I promised I'd never let Diego suffer alone like she did." Leonardo, for his part, had shared carefully edited memories of his own life. He spoke of his love for Monterey, of how he missed the simple times of his family before everything got complicated, of how he sometimes felt trapped in a life he hadn't fully chosen. He couldn't tell her the whole truth, but every word he did share was authentic. "Do you have family?" Manuela asked one afternoon. "I have parents," Leonardo responded. "But it's been a long time since we've had a real conversation. It's always about work, about expectations, about keeping up appearances." It was a simplified version of the truth, but it perfectly captured how he felt. Small gestures had begun to appear naturally between them, like wildflowers growing without being planted. Leonardo always left generous tips, but he wrapped them in little notes saying things like, "For Diego's treatment," or "Because you deserve something beautiful." Manuela, for her part, had started serving him extra-large portions, ensuring his Coca-Cola was always ice-cold, bringing him extra fresh tortillas because the chef made too many. They were sweet lies they both understood as small declarations of affection. One day, Leonardo arrived with a scratch on his hand he had gotten fixing something at home, and Manuela immediately brought alcohol and a Band-Aid without him asking. "You can't go around hurt," she said while tending to the wound with a tenderness that made him feel more cared for than ever. "Who will take care of me if you get hurt?" It was a question that sounded like a joke, but their eyes said it was anything but that. Their glances had become a secret language. When Roberto passed by and Manuela tensed, Leonardo reassured her with just a look, as if saying, "I'm here, you're not alone." When Leonardo seemed worried about something related to work or family, Manuela smiled at him in that special way she had, as if reminding him that good things existed in the world. One day, while she served him coffee, their hands brushed accidentally, and neither pulled away immediately. It was just a second, but in that second, Leonardo felt an electric current run through his entire body. "Sorry," murmured Manuela, but her flushed cheeks said she had felt the same. "Don't apologize," Leonardo responded softly. Never apologize for making someone feel alive. It was a dangerous, intimate statement that crossed a line between friendship and something deeper, but neither regretted saying or hearing it. One afternoon, while Leonardo waited for his food, Manuela sat across from him for the first time, taking advantage of Roberto having stepped out to run some mysterious errands. "Can I ask you something?" she said, nervously playing with the edge of her apron. "Why do you come here every day? And don't tell me it's just for the tacos." Leonardo smiled, knowing the moment had come to be as honest as he could without revealing the full truth. "I come for you," he admitted simply, "because in all the places I've been, among all the people I've met, I've never found someone who makes me feel so real." Manuela looked at him with shining eyes. "Real," she repeated. "Yes," confirmed Leonardo, as if I could be myself without pretending to be someone else. It was ironic, considering he was technically pretending to be someone different every day, but deep down, it was the purest truth he had spoken in years. "I feel the same," Manuela whispered. "When you're here, I feel like I'm more than just a waitress trying to survive." But what neither of them knew was that Roberto had returned early from his errands and had been watching them from the kitchen with an expression of fury that boded nothing good. "We need to act fast," Leonardo murmured to Manuela while pretending to review the menu he already knew by heart. It was Thursday night, and the restaurant was quieter than usual, giving them a perfect opportunity to plan their next move. Roberto had been particularly aggressive the last few days, and both Leonardo and Manuela knew something bad was brewing. "He knows you're not a normal customer," Manuela whispered nervously while pouring water into his glass. "Yesterday he asked me your full name, where you worked, why you came so often. I had to make up that you were my cousin from Guadalajara." Leonardo felt a pang of guilt for putting her in that position, but also admiration for her quick improvisation. "Did he believe it?" he asked. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "But for now, he hasn't asked more questions." Leonardo discreetly observed where Roberto was supervising the cash register with his usual suspicious expression. "We need those proofs you mentioned in your note," he told Manuela. "The documents, the photos, everything you have." "They're hidden at my house," she responded, "but I can't get them out. Roberto has people watching where I live." The revelation that Roberto had surveillance on Manuela made Leonardo feel a cold, calculated fury. This had gone too far. His employee wasn't just stealing and using the restaurant for criminal activities. He was harassing and threatening an innocent woman in her own home. "What kind of surveillance?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "A car that appears and disappears," she explained. "Different cars, but always the same men. And sometimes I see someone standing on the corner of my street when I leave early for work." Leonardo nodded, quickly processing the options. As a millionaire, he had access to resources Manuela couldn't even imagine. Private investigators, lawyers specializing in organized crime, police contacts who could handle this type of delicate situation. But using any of those resources would immediately reveal his true identity. "Do you trust me?" he asked directly. Manuela looked into his eyes for a long moment. "With my life," she responded without hesitation. "Then I need you to do exactly what I'm about to tell you." The plan Leonardo devised was risky, but necessary. Manuela would leave her house at her usual time to go to work. But instead of taking the bus she always took, she would walk 2 extra blocks to a bakery Leonardo had researched the previous night. There, he would be waiting with a car borrowed from one of his trusted employees, and together they would go back to her house by a different route to retrieve the evidence while the watchers thought she was on her way to the restaurant. "It's very dangerous," Manuel objected. "If they see us together, if they discover we're collaborating." "They won't see us," Leonardo assured her with a confidence he didn't know where it came from. "And even if they did, it's time someone stood up to Roberto." There was something different in Leonardo's voice, a natural authority Manuela hadn't noticed before. For a moment, he sounded less like a concerned customer and more like someone accustomed to giving orders and getting things done. "Have you done this before?" she asked perceptively. "Done what?" Leonardo responded, realizing he had shown more than he intended. "Plan things like this. Talk as if you know exactly what to do in dangerous situations." Leonardo hesitated for a moment. Every conversation with Manuela brought him closer to the moment when he would have to reveal the truth, and every lie he told felt like a betrayal of the trust she had placed in him. "I've had to solve complicated problems before," he said finally, which was technically true without being a complete lie, "but never problems that mattered as much as this." "Why does it matter so much?" Manuela asked, and Leonardo knew he had reached an emotional point of no return. "Because you matter," he responded with total honesty. "Because Diego matters. Because what Roberto is doing is wrong. And because someone has to do something about it." Manuela reached her hand across the table and touched his briefly. It was a small gesture, but loaded with meaning. "No one has ever fought for me before," she murmured. "Do you know what that feels like?" Leonardo interlaced his fingers with hers for a moment before both realized they were in public and pulled apart quickly. "Now I do," he responded, referring both to fighting for someone and having someone fight for him. The next day, the plan was executed perfectly. Leonardo waited in the blue Civic of his personal secretary, wearing a cap and sunglasses, while Manuela casually walked toward the El Bun Pan bakery. in the Independencia neighborhood. Roberto's watchers followed their usual routine, positioning themselves to observe the bus stop she would never board. When Manuela got into Leonardo's car, he could see the mix of fear and determination in her expression. "Are you sure about this?" he asked one last time. "More sure than ever," she responded. Manuela's house was a modest single-story building on a cobblestone street with red geranium pots in the window that spoke of the care she maintained her home with despite the circumstances. "The evidence is in a box under my bed," she explained as she opened the door. "Photos, documents, even audio recordings I made with my phone when he talked on the phone with those people." Leonardo followed her inside, immediately noticing the details that spoke of Manuela's economic reality. Old but impeccably clean furniture, family photos in cheap frames, a small television that was probably 10 years old. In Manuela's room, while she pulled a shoebox from under bed, Leonardo saw a photograph on a nightstand that made him stop completely. It was Manuela with a thin 17-year-old boy, both smiling in what seemed to be Monterey's Macro Plaza. The resemblance between the siblings was evident. The same honey-colored eyes, the same warm smile, the same expression of genuine kindness. "That's Diego," Manuela said, noticing Leonardo looking at the photo. That was taken the day before he started chemotherapy. It was his 17th birthday. Leonardo felt something break inside his chest. That boy, that child fighting cancer, was real. It wasn't just a sad story Manuela had told him. It was a real person with real dreams who needed real help, and he had the power to provide it immediately. "Manuela," he said with a trembling voice, "I need to tell you something." But before he could continue, the sound of cars stopping abruptly outside froze them. "They've found us," Manuela whispered in terror, and Leonardo knew the time for revelations had run out. "Stay back." Leonardo ordered Manuela with an authority she had never heard in his voice before. He approached the window and saw 3 black cars parked outside the house with men who clearly didn't belong to the neighborhood. Roberto got out of the middle car, talking on the phone with agitated gestures, pointing toward the house. "How many exits are there?" Leonardo asked quickly, and Manuela was surprised by the calm with which he seemed to be assessing the situation. "The front door, the back door leading to the patio, and a window in the kitchen," she responded, trembling. Leonardo took out his phone and dialed a number Manuela couldn't see. "This is Leonardo Mendoza," he said firmly. "I need security teams in the Independencia neighborhood immediately. Calle Morelos number 234. It's an emergency." Manuela looked at him with wide eyes, slowly processing what she had just heard. "Leonardo Mendoza," she repeated in a whisper, as in Mendoza restaurants, as in the owner of Tradiciones de Monterrey. Leonardo completed, turning to her with a mix of determination and terror in his eyes. "Yes, Manuela, I'm the owner of the restaurant where you work." Manuela's world shook as if an earthquake had struck. Everything began to make sense in the most painful way possible. The familiarity with which Leonardo observed the restaurant, the way he knew every detail of the menu, his confidence in making promises of help, his knowledge of how to handle crisis situations. "Since when have you known?" she asked with a broken voice. "Since when have you known about Roberto?" "Since the first day," Leonardo admitted, and he saw tears begin to form in her eyes. "I went to the restaurant because I suspected something was wrong, but I didn't know how bad it was until you gave me that note." "So it was all a lie," Manuela murmured, stepping back. "All this time you knew who I was, where I worked, how much money I made. You approached me as part of your investigation." "No," Leonardo exclaimed desperately. "That's not how it happened. Yes, I went there to investigate, but everything I feel for you, everything we've shared, that's real, more real than anything I've experienced in my life." Outside, the banging on the front door began, accompanied by Roberto's voice shouting, "Manuela, I know you're in there. Come out now. How can I believe anything you say?" Manuela asked with tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're a millionaire. To you, I'm just a poor employee who caused you problems." Leonardo felt those words pierce his heart like daggers. "Listen to me," he said, gently taking her by the shoulders. "Everything in my life has been fake until I met you. The people around me, who smile when they see me, who tell me I'm wonderful. They're all there for my money. You're the first person in years who saw me as a man before knowing I'm a millionaire. The banging on the door intensified, and the sound of someone trying to force the lock was heard. When you tended the wound on my hand, Leonardo continued urgently. When you asked about my family, when you worried because I seemed sad, all that was because you knew I was rich. Manuela slowly shook her head. No, she admitted. I felt something special for you from the first day, when I didn't even know your full name. Then believe in that, Leonardo pleaded. Believe in what we both feel, not in the circumstances that brought us here. The sound of the front door being forced open made them react immediately. Through the back door, Leonardo ordered, taking the box of evidence in one hand and Manuela's hand in the other. They ran toward the back of the house as they heard the heavy boots of several men entering through the front door. Check all the rooms, Roberto's voice shouted. Find those documents. In the backyard, Leonardo helped Manuela climb over the low fence separating her house from the neighbors, an elderly man who was watering his plants and looked at them in surprise. Don Aurelio, Manuela shouted, call the police, please. The old man nodded immediately and ran back into his house. Leonardo and Manuela ran down the alley behind the houses, hearing shouts and the sound of things being destroyed in her home. My house, Manuela murmured with anguish. They're destroying my house. We'll fix it, Leonardo promised. I'll buy you a new house if necessary. I don't want you to buy me anything, Manuela exclaimed, stopping suddenly. Don't you realize that's exactly the problem? Leonardo stopped too, realizing he had said exactly the worst thing he could at that moment. I'm sorry, he said immediately. I didn't mean it that way. I meant I'll do whatever is necessary to help you, but in the way you want, not the way I impose. Manuela looked at him with a deep expression of pain. Do you know the difference between you and Roberto? She asked with trembling voice. Leonardo shook his head, fearing the answer. Roberto uses his power to hurt people, Manuela said. But you use your power to control people, maybe with good intentions, but it's control all the same. The words were like a slap to Leonardo, because he knew they held some truth. His entire life, he had solved problems with money, helped people with money, shown love with money. He had never learned to simply be there for someone without trying to fix everything. You're right, he admitted finally. But I want to learn. I want to learn to be the man you deserve, not the man I have to be because of my last name or bank account. In the distance, police sirens began to be heard, approaching quickly. If you really love me, Manuela said, looking directly into his eyes, then prove it by being honest with me from now on. No more lies, no more secrets, no more games. Leonardo nodded solemnly. I promise you, he said, but first let me tell you something I should have said from the beginning. He stepped closer to her, taking her hands in his. I fell in love with you when I saw you care for that customer at the corner table with the same gentleness you gave the important table customers. I fell in love with your strength when you told me about Diego. I fell in love with your courage when you decided to trust me with that note despite the danger, and I fell in love with your heart when you worried about me without knowing who I really was. Tears were now running down both their cheeks. But what hurts me most, Leonardo continued, is knowing that I may have lost a chance for you to fall in love with the real me, because I never gave you the opportunity to know him. But what Leonardo didn't know was that Manuela had a confession of her own that would change everything he thought he knew about their story. Can Manuela forgive Leonardo? Leonardo, Manuela said softly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I also have something to confess to you. The police sirens were getting closer, but at that moment, standing in the alley behind the houses of the Independencia neighborhood, the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. Leonardo looked at her with a mix of hope and terror, wondering what else could change in a conversation that had already transformed everything he believed he knew about their relationship. From the second day you came to the restaurant, Manuela continued, I knew exactly who you were. Leonardo felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. What? He murmured, sure he had misheard. You knew? My brother Diego is very smart, Manuela explained with a sad smile. And when I told him about this mysterious customer who came every day with different disguises, he said, Manuela, look up Leonardo Mendoza, the restaurant owner, on the internet. And there was your photo. Leonardo stood completely still, slowly processing the magnitude of what he had just heard. All this time, while he worried about how she would react to discovering his identity, she already knew and had chosen to play along. But why? Leonardo asked with a broken voice. Why did you pretend you didn't know? Why didn't you say anything? Manuela stepped closer to him, and for the first time since they had run out her house, Leonardo saw tenderness instead of pain in her eyes. Because I realized something very important, she said. You weren't acting like the millionaire Leonardo Mendoza when you were with me. You were acting like Leo, the man who cared about my brother, who asked how I slept, who took care of me when Roberto yelled at me. Leo. No one had called him Leo since he was a child, and his grandmother used to. Hearing that name from Manuela's lips was like receiving a hug after years of being cold. I understood that you were also pretending, Manuela continued, but not pretending to be better than you were, but pretending to be simpler than you were. And that made me realize that maybe for the first time in your life, you wanted someone to know you for who you really are, not for what you have. Leonardo felt tears running down his cheeks, tears of relief and gratitude, so deep he had no words to express them. So when you said you trusted me, Leonardo began to ask. I trusted Leo, Manuela interrupted softly, the man who sat at the corner table and made me feel like I was the most important person in the world, the man who promised to help without knowing if I could give him anything in return. And when you said you were falling in love, Leonardo continued, almost not daring to finish the question. I fell in love with Leo, Manuela confirmed, but also with the courage of Leonardo Mendoza to give up all his comforts to uncover the truth. I fell in love with a man who had so much money he could have solved everything with a phone call, but chose to sit with me on that parquet-funded Dora bench and listen to my story. At that moment, the police cars turned the corner of the alley with red and blue lights illuminating the house walls. But before they arrived, Leonardo took Manuela's face in his hands. Can you forgive me for not trusting you from the beginning? He asked. Can you give me another chance to be honest? Manuela smiled, and it was the most beautiful smile Leonardo had ever seen in his life. I already did, she responded. I've been giving it to you all these days. The police approached running toward them, but also 3 black vans arrived with men in suits who clearly weren't regular police. Mr. Mendoza, one of the van men, said, We're from the security team you requested. Roberto Herrera and his associates have been detained. We found evidence of money laundering and threats in the lady's house. Leonardo nodded, but he never let go of Manuela's hand. What evidence? He asked. The documents the lady had collected, plus what we found on the phones of the men we arrested. The security agent explained. We have enough to prosecute them for fraud, money laundering, threats, and criminal association. It was exactly what Leonardo had expected, but he realized he no longer felt satisfied with just legal justice. He wanted something more, something money and lawyers couldn't buy. He wanted a future with the woman standing beside him, holding his hand as she spoke to the police with a bravery that filled him with pride and admiration. And now what follows? Manuela asked, looking directly into his eyes. Now follows the most important part. Leonardo responded. Now follows you meeting Diego and him meeting the man his sister fell in love with. 3 months later, Leonardo stood outside the University Hospital in Monterey, holding a bouquet of yellow flowers and a bag of tacos from Tradiciones de Monterey, but they weren't the same tacos served when Roberto ran the place. Leonardo had implemented complete changes, a new manager who treated all employees with respect, higher wages, improved medical benefits, and a scholarship program for the children of workers who wanted to study. Manuela had been promoted to general supervisor, but more importantly, she had accepted to be his official girlfriend after weeks of real, honest dates where Leonardo arrived as himself, without disguises or pretenses. Nervous? Manuela asked, arriving at his side after parking her new car. A gift she had accepted only after Leonardo explained it was for security reasons. not to impress her. Terribly nervous, Leonardo admitted. What if he doesn't like me? What if he thinks I'm not good enough for his sister? Manuela laughed. That musical sound that had become his favorite in the whole world. Leo, she said, using the nickname only she was allowed to use. He already likes you. He's been waiting to meet you since I told him the whole story. They went up to the 5th floor of the hospital, where Diego Sanchez was in a private room Leonardo had arranged, but officially assigned for medical availability to avoid hurting Manuela's pride. When they entered the room, Leonardo saw the young man he had only known through photos but who already felt like family. Diego was sitting on the bed, reading a structural engineering book, and when he saw them enter, his face lit up with a smile identical to his sister's. "Leo," he exclaimed with genuine emotion. "Finally, Manuela doesn't stop talking about you." Leonardo approached the bed, feeling surprisingly emotional. This 17-year-old boy had fought cancer with a strength that humbled Leonardo and had done so while worrying more about his sister's well-being than his own. "Diego," Leonardo said, extending his hand. "It's an honor to finally meet you." Diego ignored the extended hand and gave him a strong hug. "Thank you," he murmured in his ear. "Thank you for taking care of my sister and for giving me a chance to live." "The doctors say the treatment is working perfectly," Manuela said with tears of happiness in her eyes. "In 6 months, Diego will be able to return to school and then to university." Diego added with determination, "I've already been accepted at the Monterey Institute of Technology to study civil engineering. I'm going to build bridges like I've always dreamed." Leonardo felt a deep satisfaction that was completely different from any business success he had experienced. This was a result of doing the right thing, of using his resources for something that truly mattered. But more than that, it was a result of having found a family that loved him for who he was, not for what he had. "I brought tacos," Leonardo said, lifting the bag from our restaurant. "Our restaurant?" Manuela asked, raising an eyebrow. "Well," Leonardo responded with a shy smile, "I was thinking maybe you could be a partner. You know better than anyone what that place needs to be truly special." It was a business proposition, but both knew it was much more than that. It was an invitation to build something together, to be true partners in life. They spent the afternoon in the hospital eating tacos, laughing, and planning the future. Diego told them about his study plans. Manuela shared her idea for improving the restaurant, and Leonardo realized he had never been so happy. When it was time to leave, Diego stopped him at the door. "Leo," he said seriously, "there's something I want to ask you." Leonardo nodded, preparing for anything. "Are you going to marry my sister?" he asked directly. Leonardo looked at Manuela, who had turned completely red but was smiling. "If she accepts me," Leonardo responded honestly, "and when she's ready, you'd better treat her well," Diego said with feigned seriousness, "because even though I'm sick, I can still beat you up." The three of them laughed, and Leonardo knew he had found not only the love of his life, but also the family he had always wanted to have. That night, standing on the terrace of Leonardo's apartment with a view of Monterey's lights, Manuela leaned against his chest as they watched the city that had brought them together. "Do you know what's the most incredible thing about this whole story?" she asked Manuela. "What?" Leonardo responded, breathing in the scent of her hair. "That you went to the restaurant disguised to uncover the truth about your employees," she said. "But what you really discovered was the truth about yourself." Leonardo hugged her tighter, knowing she was right. He had gone tradition to Monterey as a distrustful millionaire and had found the man he really wanted to be, a man capable of loving without conditions, of fighting without expecting rewards, of being vulnerable without losing strength. "I love you, Manuela Sanchez," he murmured against her hair. "I love you, Leo Mendoza," she responded, using the name that was only theirs. And in the city of Monterey, under the stars shining over the mountains of Sierra Madre Oriental, a millionaire and a waitress wrote the end of their love story, which was really just the beginning of everything yet to come. Did you like the story? Subscribe now and leave a like to support. Tell me in the comments what you felt.